everyone, and thank you for joining me and Irina in our Mindful Mondays. We have weekly talks about different psychological themes, and today we're gonna address fear. Today we have such an important topic. It's around fear, and fear is something that we all experience from time to time. And it's actually a good emotion. It's something that is helping us to deal with something, but it can have a really negative consequences on our lives if we don't know how to manage it. So I'm really happy to talk with you about that and to hear some of your thoughts about fear, how to handle it, what it's in the core, what the fear is.
Yeah, thank you for the question and for the introduction. And I think it is a very important topic because indeed fear is one of our core emotions, and as all of them, it serves a very important purpose. And no emotion is really bad. It's the way we interpret it or the way we do not understand it that makes the experience uncomfortable or unpleasant for us. So essentially, fear is there to ensure our survival, if you like. We feel threatened, something happens, we're out in the jungle back in the day when our brains started developing. You hear a sound that sounds a bit odd, or you see something with your peripheral vision that signals danger, and the fear comes up. And so that's a signal to your brain that you need to either run faster or you need to activate for fight, or so basically it sends a signal of threat, activates the system, and you're ready to fight, flight, or freeze depending on the circumstances. And so the emotion is there to ensure we survive. The problem with it begins when we get stuck in that fear, and instead of being a very short-lived emotions, it's there showing you that there is a risk, and once you assess the situation, you act accordingly, the threat is gone, you return back to living your life. And that's what happens in the animal world. You see a gazelle being chased by a lion. The moment the chase is over, if it survived it, it shakes off, moves on with its life. It's not dwelling on, oh my God, what a horrible experience I've had. Us people being so evolved and sophisticated, there is unfortunately a trap that sometimes our very sophisticated new brain gets us trapped in certain emotions. And I think what happens when the fear becomes really an issue that we look at how to deal with it or how to address it is really when it's not functioning the way it's supposed to be and it's actually prolonged, or we are fearing something without those external indicators that there is a threat. We're almost responding to our own ideas in our head, So I think that's the kind of fears that we will be focusing more, I guess, today, because this is something that we can and should learn to understand better and manage it, if you like, because the other fear does not need to be managed. It's the way we are designed by nature, and it's there to make sure we survive.
Yeah, I would add also to your explanation of the fear that fear in its basic, it's kind of the same feeling as anger, because both are here for our survival. But the fear is the part when we feel we don't have control over it, that we are lacking control and we don't know how the situation will evolve. And that's by the anger, we know we have control. We know that we can do something about it, but when we feel fear, we think that we cannot do anything about it. So that's why we are in this fear. Maybe we then also go into avoidance behavior, or we are freezing, or we just don't do what it's necessary to do. So with this kind of fear that we are talking about today, that is fear because of the fear for the future, and it's not existential fear, like nothing is threatening our lives now, but maybe if something that I say will trigger some negative events in the future, then this is perceived negative things in our lives, and this is the fear that we have about. So how to get control back? Because when we get control over those thinking patterns on our what can I do today, let's say, when we have the control, then the fear dissolves a little bit.
Yes, and I think there's been research that proves that even having that illusion of control, when you don't really have the control, but you have an illusion of control, that already reduces the fear. And a good example comes to my mind, and it just proves how irrational it is. And so you cannot really defeat fear with logic, because emotion is always stronger than logic. So you need to deal with it on the emotional level. You need to rewrite the emotion. So to give you an example that just popped into my head, for many years I've had quite a substantial fear of flying in a plane. And for me it's all about control. Like, I have little trust in the people flying the plane, I guess. And sitting behind, I have no idea, I can't see them, I don't know if they're awake, and all those kind of thoughts. And so when I was flying in a helicopter in Mauritius a couple of years back, I started thinking that statistically helicopters crash much more often than commercial planes. And here am I in this helicopter with pretty strong winds throwing us around a little bit. It was completely calm, and then I realized I'm sitting next to the pilot. I can see all this, all the dashboard and everything. And somehow, completely logically, it was giving me that sense of control. So, completely irrational. I think it's just a good example to show how you can't really talk yourself into not fearing, but you can track the source of the fear, if you like. What is the story you're telling yourself? So even with the fear of flying in a plane, which is quite common actually, the stories could be very different. So, like in my case, I was scared that the plane is gonna crash. There are people who are just really scared of being trapped, and for them it's this sense of being almost in this suffocating space. And so there are different variations of the same fear, and so understanding your fear, almost befriending it, or imagining that it's sitting outside of you on a chair, and just get curious about it. Why is it there? What is it telling me? Where is it coming from? I think that's a good starting point. How would you go about it? And maybe you have some ideas, examples about other fears.
Yeah, that's what you said, to just sit with it. I usually don't put it out in a chair, so it's somewhere outside, but I try to locate it in my body or in my client's body, so they can expand it then and see what is really underneath this fear. Because usually, like you said, it's a fear of flying, but it's not fear of flying. It's actually a fear of losing control, and or it's a fear that something deeper is usually inside, or a fear of public speaking. It's, I think, the first fear in the world on the list. So what is, because speaking in public is nothing like that, but if we fear the humiliation, if we fear the judgment, if we fear the rejection that is underlying that fear of public speaking, then we can start doing something about it. Because when we address the core issue, then we can start to shift it, to change our learned behavior, our responses, because I think a lot of this is learned behavior response. Like, if I can say for myself, I don't have these kind of fears, but I saw it, for instance, by some friends. When mom was scared of the thunder and lightning, then the kids was also scared of thunder and lightning, but I was enjoying it, and I never could understand why is she afraid of that. But I think it's just like those generational traumas. It just comes from generation to generation, and also this is the same with fears and like everything else. So I like to feel the feeling, without any labels, without explanation, without judging it, but just feel it and allow it to be and say, hey, you're welcome here. And usually if I do that, after a couple of minutes, the fear is gone. It's like everything else. It's like doing a meditation when you follow one thought and you see the thought is gone if you don't put a story on it, like you said before. And changing the stories with ourselves is a big part of it.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm all for feeling the feelings. I think this is the only way really to deal with anything is. And for so many years, many of us are really running away from our feelings, and that never helps. It makes them stronger. So actually feeling them, making space for them and welcoming them, as you suggested, and ways to interact with them. You can locate them in the body. This is always great if you can. If you cannot, and sometimes you can actually locate it outside the body. And then when you do locate, take it out, or you can deal with it wherever it is. So those are different scenarios, whatever works for you. And I think with the Inside Out movie, with the second part is out now, that gives us also a good framework to actually think of those emotions as almost separate entities, and you can almost like realize, here's my fear, here's my anger, and so on. But a point I wanted to actually, that you reminded me of when you were speaking about fear of public speaking being the biggest fear out there. So yeah, I was also reading up about the research, and I think Brené Brown was conducting a lot of research around various emotions, and fear obviously was one of them. And she mentioned that she found all sorts of lists of what people are afraid of, and the most common one indeed was, she kind of put it a bit more generic, and that's the fear of social rejection. But the most interesting thing, and I think that explains why it's number one fear, is actually quite physiological. So the part of our brain that is responsible for social pain is exactly the same part of our brain that is responsible for physical pain. So it's the same part of the brain. And so, of course, our brain wants to prevent the pain at all costs. And so if by exposing yourself socially, you're risking to trigger that pain part of the brain, if you're rejected, it will do anything it can to keep you out of it. It's like, no, we're not going on that stage. Or we're not doing this live conversation because people may not like it. So no, let's just keep low profile. So it's quite physiological, and that fear is just so basic. Sometimes we can experience it physiologically before we can actually cognitively identify its presence. It's just the body starts reacting.
I think first the body reacts, then we have those thoughts, or maybe sometimes it's also different. If we overthink it about something, then we start to get the fear. I see by myself, if I'm for a long time, I don't do some public speaking, let's say on the stage, and when I have to do it after quite some time, I feel these bodily sensations of fear rising up. But if I'm regular with it, then I don't feel it. Because so I think also if we expose ourselves, but willingly expose ourselves, not that we are pushed towards it, but if we choose that we expose ourselves to our fears step by step, not too much, but really step by step, then slowly we can conquer the fear, and then that we see it's not such a big deal. It's just some story that I told myself around that I'm no good, that like we were talking last week, all those feelings of unworthiness comes out. So I think everything is so connected, and when we start to think about it in psychological terms, it's scary but beautiful at the same time, how we can deal with it and make it better and make it more vibrant, and we are free in the end.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I like this idea, but what comes up for me is also like it does work to some extent, and with certain fears, and I guess for certain people, and depending also on the I guess on the, well, as everything, I always trace it back to early childhood, right? So that kind of is the foundation for the self-esteem and other way the person is experiencing the life. So I think someone is more likely to be in a position to, say, push themselves to come onto that stage. But for someone else, it may require such a tremendous effort that they will just get overwhelmed and just the system will go shut down if they had really, really traumatic experience, for example. So I think it's really also about understanding yourself, about knowing yourself, and recognizing, is this the kind of fear that I can push through, and by exposing myself to this situation, I can overcome it and eventually even not have that fear anymore? Or am I just not ready to deal with it, and I may require to seek support, professional guidance, and actually work through the underlying issues and beliefs? So, even with again, going back to the example of fear of flying, which I've had for many years, and it was impacting my life because I love traveling. And I remember at some point someone telling me, why do you keep doing it if you're so scared of flying? Why do you keep... And I lived on an island for many years, so there was no other way, to move around. So, and what I did, I would drink some alcohol before getting on the plane. So that was my coping strategy. And I tried without as well. And I thought, one day I was counting stamps in my passport, literally, trying to rationalize it and say, look how many flights you've done, it's safe, and it doesn't work. And I thought that eventually when I get to a certain number, it will just get easier. And it wasn't. It could be one flight I felt more relaxed and another one would be more stressful. And I just couldn't get through it until I actually worked on a deeper level with that fear. So that's just been my experience. But with some other things, yeah. So I think it's just a little bit of those gray areas where you need to see where you are.
Agree.
I know that.
I agree that I don't agree, so that's the beauty of it. So you said with some fears it's harder to push through. I wouldn't push through the fear. Okay. I would try to understand it and get familiar with the thing. So what, in your example, that is my opinion, my biased opinion, that you just throw yourself there. You went to the plane, you were afraid, and you didn't do anything else around it to lower this fear and to feel it a bit less. What I'm talking about is exposure therapy. Oh. So you go to your therapist, to your coach, and together you are working on this fear. So maybe if you are afraid of the flight, I would start with you that first we start in my office, just looking to the picture of the plane, and that you get familiar with the object, with the physical plane. And after a while, and this can be in 2 years, this is not something that you can do in 2 days or in 1 hour, then you get okay with that you step into the plane. Yeah. So it's not that you just throw yourself in and then everything will be okay. No, it doesn't work like that.
Okay, then we are kind of saying similar thing, I guess. So that's kind of why I agree with that. So just by purely exposing yourself, you will not necessarily get there. But if you do it on a conscious level, which is kind of what I got to in the end. But again, I still believe that for certain people, just this exposure therapy, which I've read quite a bit about, it may not work depending on the underlying background story, let's say, or if there was significant trauma.
That's why you need to work with therapists.
Therapists, yeah, but I think sometimes they need to really rewire it on a, just repeating it may not really, or it may take 5 years where you could, for example, through hypnotherapy, deal with it in a few sessions. So that's just...
I think it's possible if you want to, if you're really afraid of something and you really wish to do it, I think it's possible to overcome these fears, but really slowly. It's not, we don't have, also as therapists, we don't have magic pills to wave around your head and say 3 magic spells and you will be free of everything. So I wish it would be like this, but sorry, it doesn't work like that.
Yeah, no magic pill, no magic wand, and I think also no size fits all. So really, it's understanding the client's experience. We're not going to be like, oh, you have a fear of flying, okay, this is what you need. Oh, you have a fear of snakes, this is your prescription. This is not exactly how it works. But yeah, I think in many cases it does help to work with a professional to really understand the fear.
Yeah, and now at that point I would like to invite our listeners, if you have any questions, just write it down in the comments and maybe we can answer you, and you're most welcome to do that. Do you have any techniques that we can give to the listeners? What can they do if they feel some fear? Is there something that I can do now by myself that I will be okay? A little bit, not like 100% better, but at least like 10% better.
Well, 10% I would always say go back to your breath, because breath is just magic, right? So there are some techniques to downregulate your system, and when you're breathing, you can't be really, if you're focusing on your breathing, if you're counting and you, for example, doing either the box breathing that most of the people are aware of, or you're doing the one I spoke about recently in one of my posts, you inhale to the count of 4, you hold the breath to the count of 7, and you exhale through the mouth to the count of 8. I really like this one, for example. That helps the system to calm down. So that would be my first go-to. And to your point of people asking questions, please also share what your biggest fears are. I would love to hear what's really common for our listeners. And there is no judgment. There is, everything is welcome here. So I think, yeah, going back to the question, I think breathing is like an immediate relief. And to the extent possible is also reframing it. But again, not trying to go through logic, like, oh no, this plane is not going to fall because it only happens. But more like, I'm not feeling scared, I'm feeling excited. And sometimes you can trick your brain, It's like even on the, what do you call it? The ride in the park, just completely
roller coaster.
The roller coaster. So some people are screaming because they're scared. Some people are screaming because they're excited, and the mind has no clue what's going on. So it's a story you tell yourself. So similarly, tell yourself a better story. Tell yourself, oh, I'm actually super excited. This is fun. It's almost like I'm on a roller coaster. It's not turbulence. Yeah, so tell yourself a story, but also the emotion, like, oh, I'm excited, I'm loving it. This is great. What would you recommend?
First, I would try to a bit analyze my fear. What is it about? Just taking a little bit closer. Why am I scared now? Is it something that I can do to prevent this fear? Because fear is also a really good motivator. If I'm afraid I will not pass the test, the exam, then I will just learn more. Or if I'm afraid that I won't do my presentation good, then I will put a little bit more effort into it, so I can be really better then. So I think in this case, fear is okay, but we need to recognize it, because if this fear is paralyzing us and then we go into avoidance behavior and we don't learn more or we don't prepare more, then this fear is gonna take its text. But if we do something about it, if we take control, okay, what can I do now? Then I think this fear is okay, is nice. Not nice, but it's helpful. So I would always say, take a deeper look. Why are you afraid? Not just, oh, I'm afraid. Okay, this is the first step. You are labeling your emotion as fear. But what is something deeper that you can link to this fear? Yeah. And then when you have those connections, then you can maybe start, if it's nothing so big, you can start with positive self-talk. And you address that afraid little part of you, that everything is gonna be okay, that you're gonna survive this, and it's not life-threatening, it's just the way you are perceiving things. Or maybe it's something that you learned from your mom or dad or the surroundings that you are in, that you should be afraid of this thing, but maybe you don't have to be afraid of it. So I think just getting to know your fears.
Yeah.
What are they? What are they telling you? What are they shielding you from? And then you can do or some really soothing self-talk. I love to do when I feel fear that I don't know where to put it. I like to do vagus nerve regulation. So for me, the easiest one is just to cross the fingers, put it behind the head, and then look to the elbows, but only with the eyes to the left and to the right, without moving the head, until I feel something is moving in my body. So usually I have this urge to yawn, and then this is a way that my body is relaxing. So you activate your parasympathetic nervous system, and then you are a little bit okay, everything is okay. So with this kind of exercises, you're helping your body, your amygdala, to calm down a little bit, because like I said before, it's physical response also, and if we only try to do it with our mind, our bodies don't follow it all the time. But with this vagus nerve stimulation, relaxation, and also with EFT techniques that I don't usually do, but some people really love them, or with self-hugging a little bit and just gently nourishing us, it's gonna be okay. Then we can a little bit release that grip of fear that we have, that fear has on us. So that's something I would go to.
Yeah, thank you. That's very helpful. I think great to also give some exercises that people can go back to. So thank you for sharing that. And I totally agree. It's great to have kind of bottom up and up to bottom, both ways you approach it, you know, from head, but also through the body, because this is the most effective way to through with any emotion.
Yeah, I really love somatic work, and this is, I think if we help our bodies to relax, also with breathing exercises and with different kind of stimulations that we can do, I think we can also get a little bit in touch with our early childhood traumas, and maybe they don't have to be big. It can be just that you wanted to say something to your parents, and your parents said, no, we are not talking, be quiet. And this can have a big impact on your life, because you have this feeling that you cannot speak when others are talking. And but when you put the flashlight on that thought, on that moment in time, then you can say, but it's okay. It's okay. I allow myself to do that what I want to do. So be compassionate again with yourself. Yeah. Oh,
okay.
We are again 30 minutes.
I think this is a very good way to end this, unless you have anything else to add. I think just on the note of encouraging everyone to be compassionate to themselves and being curious to whatever feelings are arising, because as we said in the beginning, there are no bad feelings, they're all messengers. So listen to them, get the message with curiosity, with compassion to yourself, and explore. You may learn something very interesting and helpful.
Yeah, thank you for that conversation. Yeah.
And then
see you next time.
Everyone watching us. Yeah.
Yeah.
See you.
Bye bye.